So we are live now.
Welcome everybody to our regular meeting of council on October the 20th. So welcome to our staff and all of council and our public who are on live on stream with us. So welcome to everybody. And before we begin our meeting, if we can open it by having a moment of silence, please. Thank you. I have our first motion. It was moved by Karen Jennings and seconded by Jeff Carroll that the regular meeting of council agenda dated October the 20th, 2020 be approved as circulated. I assume there were no motions, no items moved forward, Jasmine?
No items move forward.
Okay, so all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. I'll also remind all of council that if you have a disclosure of interest, you can declare it now or anytime during the meeting. And we'll now go to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was on October the 6th. And I have a motion moved by Klaus Vandermeer, seconded by Ian Straight, that the minutes of the regular meeting of October 6th, 2020 be approved as circulated. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Is there any business arising from those minutes at Klaus?
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Just curious, I know the thing just went in the paper last week. If we got any reply back for the septic system RFQ?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, then I see no other business arising from those minutes. Tonight, we have no delegations. So we're going to go to our first report of the municipal officers. And that one is going to be yours, Jasmine, on the clerk administrator hiring process.
Great.
So thank you, Jasmine, for this.
So on the committee of the whole meeting on October 6th, council directed staff to post for the clerk administrator position. So that has been posted as directed. And the council, the ad closes on October 30th. So given that the clerk administrator position reports directly to council, the hiring policy states that the interview panel and process is at the discretion of council. So I put together the following recommended process for the clerk administrator maternity leave coverage hiring process, which is to have the applications. So it's three-parter. So the applications be shortlisted and all applications be provided to council as part of the in-camera agenda package for the meeting on November 3rd. So at this meeting, all of council will shortlist applicants for the interviews. The interview process itself will be consist of 2 representatives from council as well as the clerk administrator for a 3-member panel. And the idea is this provides a little bit more flexibility in scheduling to have 2 members versus more than 2, which would constitute a meeting of council. And then the final step would be the panel, rather than the panel making the final decision, the panel will submit the top candidates to council in an in-camera meeting, either in a special meeting or an appropriately scheduled regular meeting. So what I mean by that is one that is close in time frame. So we don't have to wait 2 weeks or a week to have that meeting. To confirm the top scoring candidate, and that council can determine the appropriate offer to be provided to that applicant. So tried to find the best balance of council being kind of leading this process as well as the practicalities of scheduling. So we're looking for an endorsement of that process along with the provision of 2 representatives to sit on the interview panel itself.
Okay, Klaus? Yes.
So when you're looking for an endorsement, Jasmine, yes, Can you hear me?
Yes.
No, sorry. Okay. A very good report, Jasmine, first off. A lot of good detail. So you're looking for an endorsement, meaning you're looking for a motion to accept the 3 recommendations?
No, it's more to, the motion itself will read that the council endorsed the proposed clerk administrator hiring process. So the
Okay.
motion itself, it should be fine.
Okay, thank you. A follow-up comment, Reed, if I may?
Yes, yes.
In regards to the 2 members from council, to be on that, I would feel in this particular position, being the top position in our staff that we have, that the Reeve should definitely sit on this 2-member panel from council, because the Reeve is the person that deals with that clerk administrative person on a regular basis. That's my suggestion.
Okay, so any other questions, comments? I do have a motion here. It was moved by Jeff Carroll.
So I think if council is amenable to the plan, then we should nominate 2 members to sit on the panel.
So we do that before we do this motion, Jasmine?
That would make sense. Yeah.
Okay, because that is part of this motion, I see.
Yes.
So, well, Claus, like, I would be very happy to. I have not. I haven't had the experience. I think I've left it to all of you, most of you, for most of the hiring. But I would be more than happy to do that if council wishes. So thank you. Yes, Claus.
So Jasmine, you're looking for us to nominate somebody?
Well, either you can self-nominate or you can nominate someone else. That's fine.
Okay, well, if I were suggested the Reeves then sit on, so I'd like to nominate Councillor Carroll to be the other member.
Reeves, sorry.
Yes, Jeff.
I mean, I'm fine with that. I'd be happy to sit on it. I mean, if there's somebody else that wants to or wants to bring up for discussion, I'm open for it. But I mean, I'm open for being on it with Reeve Dobson if that's what council chooses.
Any other suggestions then? I see no other suggestions, Jasmine. So if council wishes, then I can read this motion and we can vote on it. And if that be the case, then it would be myself and Councillor Carroll, and we would, I guess, obviously, we need to deal with this. Timing is of the essence, so we'd have to get onto it immediately. And I know that you've already done that. So I think if there's nothing else, then I'll read this motion. It was moved by Jeff Carroll and seconded by Karen Jennings that council receive the following report. That was the hiring process report, and that the following be approved, that council endorse the proposed clerk administrator hiring process and provide 2 representatives to sit on the interview panel. Do you want to name the 2 in this motion?
So, well, I've noted in the minutes, Reeve Dobson and Councillor Carroll.
Okay, thank you. So all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, Jasmine, thanks for that one.
Thank you.
And moving on, yours is also the next one. That's on the COVID-19 planning public meetings.
Yes. So, thank you, Reeve Dobson. Council did provide direction at the regular meeting of October 6th to bring forward information from the health unit regarding the public meeting from the official plan. So I did reach out to the health unit and they did assist me in putting together this report. At this time, staff do not recommend a public meeting for the planning applications. So there's 3 concurrent items that we have going on. So we do have the official plan itself that we're redoing, the update to the accessory dwelling discussions, along with we do have one upcoming rezoning application. So the motion is intended to apply to those meetings, but not necessarily future meetings because the circumstances can change And it's good to revisit these on a regular basis. The health unit does suggest that virtual meetings are definitely the better option to protect actors involved. They did note that there are local cases are relatively low. We're seeing increased spread because of our proximity to the city of Ottawa. And there is concerns that because many of our residents either work or visit the city on a regular basis. The other main issues are that public planning meetings do have a statutory notice provisions. So we do have to advertise for a certain period of time for public meetings for 20 days through both the newspaper or through mail. So while we may release the advertisements and the public meeting may be legal, it's not necessarily guaranteed that the meeting will be legal when it's planned to actually take place. So it would mean that we'd end up having to reschedule that meeting. Logistics for a large-scale public meeting would be challenging, particularly given the staffing complement that we do have. Not impossible, but very challenging. And providing for distancing and kind of policing the members would be kind of paramount. And I think one of the things the health unit noted is that there is a tendency when people meet in groups, particularly if there's, residents that, know each other and want to stop, we can't in our meetings facilitate, social gatherings. So people can't stop and talk inside or stop and talk outside as facilitated by our meetings, because at that point we're then hosting a social gathering. So it's not to say it's impossible, but we have to make sure that we're cognizant of that. The other aspect that kind of fed into the recommendation was the fact that we do get good viewership and a number of watches over our digital participation. In fact, usually a little bit more than what we would be able to reach in person. So we certainly have clear, measurable input that our digital meetings are effective in reaching audiences. However, it is recognized the public input is essential in these discussions. So what we've talked about, particularly with our planner, is potential additional meetings, allowing for longer notice periods for people to provide submissions, and emphasizing written input to ensure that we still get input from the public, because it is very important that the public have input. And we certainly want to do everything we can to facilitate that. Virtual and written input can actually increase accessibilities for those that are more vulnerable to COVID. So, but I'd certainly open to suggestions in terms of other measures that we could put in place to get additional participation. So the recommendation at this time is to do virtual public meetings only for the for the official plan, accessory dwelling policies, and the one upcoming rezoning application.
Okay, so I'll open it up to council if we have questions or comments. Karen?
I was talking with Jasmine earlier. I was saying that with reference to our official plan and that, I thought we had to have an open house, which I guess we don't. But perhaps after the draft of the official plan, we could maybe do an open house where we could monitor by having people register to be able to come into the open house. If it was at Rosedale Hall, they could come in one entrance and go out another entrance. Just if it was thought that perhaps that public one-on-one versus just the virtual, but definitely having the public meeting by virtual. But if we did it like an open house where we had control, because you have to book to come in, you have to wear your mask, we do the screening, all that sort of stuff. So it was just a thought that I had to put out there for council's consideration.
Thanks, Karen. I see Jasmine and then Claus.
I think the idea of a public house an open house to be able to have some members of the public meet with staff and have questions answered or go through the draft and get some more comments that way, I think could be accommodated for sure. Because there's a lot less people in one spot.
Claus?
Thank you, Reeve. If we had that open house after we do the virtual meeting and so forth, would we have enough staff to control people coming into the open house, Jasmine?
Yeah, so it would be a pretty intensive RSVP system. So we'd essentially like
Okay.
schedule blocks for people.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, questioning this, not questioning it, but my question is, can that part of our virtual or after virtual meeting, could that be held at the chamber as opposed, would it be any easier? Because you're only bringing one person in at a time, as you say. Would it be easier at our chamber?
No, the Rosedale Hall would be much easier venue for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, my only thought was wondering if it would be easier for the staff and everything there, but I can understand. So any other questions then on this? Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, Reeve. Three, I just want to make sure I guess I understand it. So it would be, people would book time. This is sort of after we've gone through the drafting part of the official plan and before we're like thinking about adopting it, I guess, is that the idea? And then, so if there's more input that we want to make changes to it.
Would be after the first draft anyways.
So we have the first draft through our meetings and people can, and we'll have virtual talks and all that stuff before this, right?
Yeah.
Would that be the thought process?
Mhm.
And then basically they would book whatever time frame and all the council, and I'm assuming like Jasmine, Carl, I don't know if anybody else would be there for staff. What staff would we need there for answering questions? And I guess the consultant group, I guess.
Yeah, that would probably be it for staff.
And then we would all be spread out, I guess, on one side of a table, and people would kind of come in and stand on the other side of the table. And if they had questions,
Yeah.
and we'd be all sort of like spread out trying to answer those questions.
Essentially, yes. I haven't quite gone into like how exactly the logistics of that would work.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm game for if this is a good idea. It is a good idea. If this idea is something that we can do, I'm game for doing it. I guess I'm just trying to understand the logistics, and also like, is this kind of contradicting what the health department kind of said by not doing public meetings, or does the health department say, well, if you do it that way, then that makes sense? I almost want to have just like, I'm game for doing it, as long as we have a stamp of approval, which I'm hoping the health department would do, just in case, God forbid, something does happen. We've crossed our T's and dotted our I's.
Mm-hmm. So the health unit won't necessarily like approve or like deny an event.
Yeah,
They'll
they won't.
assist you in achieving compliance and make suggestions for you. I think based on our conversations that I had prior to like putting together the report, the idea of an open house where it's a lot more limited in the numbers of individuals that would come in and you have blocks scheduled would be a lot more, they would be pretty amenable to that versus having a larger meeting.
So,
Yes, Jeff?
So yeah, so I guess I'm game for that. And I also, the consultant group that we've hired, are they open or closed to any type of, because I'm just like, they're a party in this too as well, as far as doing it, correct? So are they on board for something like that?
I haven't asked, but I certainly can ask.
Okay, I want to make sure that they may have certain precautions in their workplace where they're not doing certain things. I don't know, just to make sure. I like to, don't want to get through this and then they're, the opposite side comes through and they say that they're not willing to do it, or they might have input too as well, as far as if they've done other ones like this. What have they done in other municipalities that they might be able to help assist to make sure that we make it a good event too as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, thank
Jasmine,
you.
a fairly simple question maybe, but there is a possibility that we may end up even having more than one draft, right? We could add a second draft. before we
Possible.
actually have that meeting that we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be clear for that because it's not, it won't be necessarily after the first draft. We could have more than one. So any other questions then? Okay, I have a cause.
Yeah, just a quick question. Jasmine, you listed the people that would be there. Would our new public works manager be involved in this also?
Likely not, no.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a note, I guess, if council is interested in this open house option, I'd probably seek consensus from council to give direction. And then ultimately, the motion can still be passed as is if the plan is still to have the public meetings electron or virtually. And then council can provide direction to move forward with the open house process as well.
Okay, I'll go around then. I'll start with you, Karen,
Yes.
and Ian,
Yep.
Jeff.
I guess, I mean, like the conditions I just kind of listed, I would be okay with, but if we're
That's
not,
exactly.
okay, like as long as like all that stuff that I basically just kind of rambled on about, if we're on that, that's what we're looking at, then yes, I agree.
And Claus?
Yes, I agree. And repeating what Councillor Carroll said, the same thing.
So I think you have unanimous also from me, Jasmine. So
Great.
we have that consensus. And I do have the motion here. It was moved by Ian Straight and second by Klaus Vandermeer that the council receive the following report, the public meetings report, and that the following be approved. The council directs staff to undertake virtual meetings only for the upcoming planning activities as provided in this report. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to the next report, and that is also yours, Jasmine. And that is the establish and regulate bylaw.
So in March 2019, Committee of the Whole did pass a motion to approve the draft establish and regulate a fire department bylaw and to place it on the next council agenda for approval. It's become apparent that the bylaw was not placed on the subsequent agenda for approval. I believe it was my error. I do apologize for that. So in order to rectify the error, we have placed it on this agenda for final approval. So I do apologize.
Thank you, Jasmine. Any questions on this? Karen?
I read through thoroughly just as a refresher since I didn't remember back to 2019. And I did have a couple questions with reference to some ESA. If it's not an approved ESA leave, why we would give a leave for a year or maybe longer. Thinking that I understand why you do approved ESA leaves, but why would we go outside of ESA? So let's say, for example, somebody wanted to go west for a job for a year. Why would we hold that position while they're gone, which could possibly turn even to longer? And it does say a second request could go through, but then I had a scenario where, so this leave's been approved and they're now out west and it wasn't an ESA. And then all of a sudden we have 3 members who want to take ESA approved leave. So then it's dwindling down the department for coverage. So why we would go outside of approved ESA leaves? Because I mean, I definitely back anything that the government says we have to do, but it was just getting into separate discretionary leaves. And then there was, I think it's Bill 181 that addresses health and safety with reference to ages on the fire department, that maybe we could have Miles look into getting some specific wording to have that put in. It's not,
Yes, Jasmine?
Sorry, what was the bill number?
I think it's Bill 181. I'm not 100% sure on that number, but that's what's in my head. I know that we're okay in how we operate our department, but I think if we're doing an amendment now, we probably should bring it in because it's been in existence for several years. And that way then it just protects us for moving forward. But our complement and everything is good the way we are. It's just for moving forward, it will protect us.
So council could, with consensus, choose to direct staff to bring forward information about those items.
We can, yes, we can get that consensus possibly. Well, I think that'll be a yes for Karen. And Ian,
Sure.
Jeff?
Yeah.
And Claus?
Yes.
Do you have that consensus, Jasmine?
So I think at this time, then the bylaw can be deferred.
Bird, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now would we also then just defer this, this motion then?
Yes.
And do I still have to put it on the table though, and then we then we just defer it, or can we just defer it now?
I would have a vote to defer the motion, yeah.
Okay. So then could I have a mover and a seconder to do that? Moved by Karen and seconded by Claus, that we defer this resolution. That is the one on establish and regulate bylaw. That's deferred. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. And moving on, Jasmine, I think that's all of yours for now. Yes. I have a motion. It was moved by Claus Vandermeer and seconded by Ian Straight that the council approve the minutes of the meeting of committee of the whole meeting of October the 6th, 2020, and approve the recommendations contained within. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now, any business arising from those minutes? Claus?
Yeah, just one item there. Council directed for alternate methods of the staff volunteer appreciation night. Do we have any recommendations yet, Jasmine, or still working on it?
Still working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on then. We have no petitions tonight. And the bylaws, we have one, and that is moved by Karen Jennings and seconded by Jeff Carroll. That bylaw 3797, 2020 being a bylaw to establish and regulate. Oh, this is the one we're deferring.
Yes, that is the one we're
Yeah.
deferring, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Okay, that's deferred. Sorry, it was just in the pile. Moved by Ian Straight, a clause, and seconded by Claus Vandermeer, that bylaw 3696, 2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council.
We're not quite there yet.
Yep, sorry. No, we have the motions and notice of motions, we had none. And under the correspondence, the action item was the ministry, yes, that was the one on the provincial appointee to the Police Services Board.
Yes. So our community member of the Police Services Board did apply to the province to act as our provincial member. Our provincial member was vacant. So our community member is now our provincial member. So it's prudent now. So this is just letting council know, and it's also prudent for us to post the position again for our community member. And just to let you guys know what's going on.
Perfect.
So there, Mr. Lai will be our community member for 3 years.
That's great. And he's already been a member for a while, so that's great. So thanks, Jasmine. I guess you don't need any motion. There's no motion for that.
No.
So moving on then, there's no information items moved forward. And before there's no unfinished and other business, but before we do adjourn, Jasmine, do we have questions?
No.
No?
Not related to this agenda.
Okay, thank you. Then we go back to the next motion then, which was moved by Ian Straight and seconded by Claus Vandermeer. That the bylaw 3696, 2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on October the 20th, 2020. Be read a first, second, and third time and passed, signed and sealed this 20th day of October 2020. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And the last motion I have, moved by Jeff Carroll and seconded by Karen Jennings, that this meeting do now adjourn at 6:31 p.m. until November the 3rd, 2020 at 6 p.m. or until the call of the Reeve, subject to need.
I think that's
All
a
in
record
favor?
for us.
I think that's a record, is right.
All in favor?
All in
There's
favor?
Nobody's
You sure?
opposed to this, eh? Thanks.
Maybe so we can just extend it because this is too short.
Too short.
There's not even a hockey game tonight to go to. So that's carried, thanks. So we're going to take, what, 3 minutes? Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
Okay, 3 minutes, and then we'll move on to the committee of the whole meeting. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, Bill,
Yes?
there is a hockey game tonight.
Oh, yeah? Where?
I have pickup hockey tonight, so it's a
Oh, yeah.
we're trying. We're trying it like a men's league. We're trying to do it. We're trying to follow the rules, all that kind of stuff. But we're giving it a go to see if. But the insurance we had to pay this year, like because you have to get insurance now, was triple.
Wow,
And
really?
which is crazy.
Wow.
It's but we had to pay triple the insurance to be just in order to be allowed to play.
Wow.
And we're only allowed in the rink. They're pretty strict. You have to be, if you're in the rooms, you have to be like 6 feet from each other, and you have to be, you're
Yeah.
only allowed in there 10 minutes, before the game. Get in there, get your stuff on. And you
Wow.
have to be out of the dressing room within 10 minutes too as well.
What about the Bears? Have you heard if they're playing or not?
I don't know, because the OHL has basically been directed from the province saying that they're allowed to play as long as there's no body contact. So if the Bears do play, I'm assuming they have to follow the same.
17-year-olds, can you see a bunch of 17-year-olds playing hockey with no contact?
At that level of hockey, if the OHL has to do it, then the Bears, I would imagine, would have to be.
Oh, they
follow
have.
suit too
They
as
would
well.
have to, definitely. They would have to, for sure.
So if there is any of that hockey, I wonder what it's going to look like, and I wonder if it's going to be non-body, like if they're saying no body contact. I mean, that's what. What's her Kathleen McKenna, I think it is. Like she's from the MPP for Sports and Rec, whatever like that, and that's what she's basically said that Ontario government is willing to do.
Yeah.
So I wonder what that's going to look like if it happens. If it happens,
There won't be as many penalties, anyways.
be a lot.
How are you-
Well, I
how
don't
are
know.
you
There might be a
supposed
lot
to
more. The problem is there might be a lot more stick work, right? Well, if I can't hit you from there, at least with my stick, I can hit you from 6 feet away.
No, you
How
have
do
to
you-
learn
how
to.
do you
You have to
supposed to have
learn the
social
stick
distance?
handle.
That's what Bobby
You
Clark
have to
did.
learn the stick handle even more.
So we
Hold on,
are
I'll be
still
back.
live, just FYI.
Yeah, we didn't say anything bad.
Okay, be careful.
Hold on, Ray.
Oh, my.
Let's get started.
I guess we don't have, you're not there, Ian, are you? No,
No, there he is.
there's Ian, yeah. Okay, and Jasmine?
Quick break.
Yeah,
She's gone to check on the babies.
Don't rush the pregnant lady.
Yeah. Oh my, a friend of mine, they had a boy and a girl too.
we're live, guys?
Yeah.
Hi, Andrew. I see you. Are you with us, Andrew?
He's still muted.
Yeah.
Don't put him on the spot like that, Bill.
Hi, Jasmine.
I'm back.
Okay, so we're going to continue then into our committee of the whole meeting of October the 20th. So welcome everyone to this meeting. I do have a motion to open the meeting. It was moved by Klaus Vandermeer and seconded by Ian Straight that the committee of the whole agenda dated October the 20th, 2020 be approved. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I'll also remind all of council that if you do have any disclosure of interest, you can declare it now or anytime during our meeting. Moving on, we have no delegations tonight, but we do have the first report of our municipal officers. And I see Jasmine with her hand up, so I'm sure she's going to tell us that we don't have Carl yet.
Yes, so I did get off the phone with Carl over our break. I did tell him to anticipate 7 o'clock. So unfortunately, he doesn't have coverage at the moment. It's not an opportune time for him. So I think it's probably best for us to stick to the 7 o'clock schedule. So it's better if we just go on to the next item.
That's what we get for breaking records, eh?
Yes.
Well, we're going to put you back to work then, Jasmine, because the first one is yours then for the personnel policy. Thank you.
Thank you. So I did provide the attached draft personnel policy along with the supplementary performance management assessment forms. So this is stemming from a couple items. Council did direct staff to look into a couple items, including extending the sorry, I don't have good words right now. Council did direct staff to amend our performance evaluation forms, which I have attached, along with council did direct staff to modify our personnel policy to increase the number of hours allotted for overtime accrual, as well as modifications for the use of acting pay. We have those changes, but we did take this opportunity to kind of do a bit of what would be called a housekeeping update to the personnel policy. While it does look extensive, most of the changes are meant to be changes to provide clarity in areas in which we've had difficulty interpreting in the past. So there's really not, while it looks wholesale, there's just some extra to provide provide clarity for staff in interpreting and provide clarity for management in interpreting as well as a few changes that reflect our actual practices. One of those would be the requirement for employees to submit their vacation times by the last business day in February. That ultimately is one of those where it's never actually been in practice or enforced. So it's good to have a policy that is used and is followed on a day-to-day basis. So we do have, most of these updates are, like I said, housekeeping updates to provide updates to clarity. Otherwise, there's a couple minor changes. We do have added the ability of a department head to undertake an internal hire. specific ability for vacation time to be negotiated at the start of hire. We did include in the disciplinary section, there was no disciplinary section for the clerk administrator position. So it was unclear as to if, say members of council or even members of staff had issues with the clerk administrator or the administrator at the time, how that would actually function. So we have provided for that in this policy as well. And we also undertook some changes in terms of the benefits, like the wording towards the benefits to actually reflect our new benefits plan and how it functions. So like I said, it looks extensive, but it's not necessarily extensive changes, but meant to make the policy more usable for staff and employees.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'll open it up to council if we have any questions or comments. I see Karen.
There's a couple of areas. I had a lengthy conversation with Jasmine today, and I apologize for holding you up. I do appreciate all the time you've put into this. There's just a couple of things that I talked about with reference to where it says at a discretion. We needed a little bit more information in order for clarity to say what is, for example, sufficient expertise. Because if it's left to an interpretation that can cause a problem for a discrimination case or whatever the case may be. So we had some discussion about getting some connection perhaps to education and experience in a job description. So if an internal candidate has the education and experience that's in our job description, then why wouldn't you then go for an internal promotion? But if you just left it strictly as a discretion of a department head without anything relevant, then it could become, a challenged issue. There were a couple of other areas, just on the vacation. My suggested preference is that we show part-time as a percentage following the Employment Standards Act versus what's in our policy. It's very generous in our policy versus the Employment Standards Act, and leave it as days for our full-time staff as is currently noted as well. Also, the words leaves, it's the same as in the fire department. If it's an ESA leave, then I have no problem in following through with it. But if it's not an ESA, then, I just have a feeling myself, it's personal though, that, ESA is definite. We have to follow the law. So I think that's where, yes, we address that and we leave the others. Also, a minor amendment on the sick. It does state 7 days and that they can carry forward 7. But we discussed this back at the end of March with reference to COVID, and our sick plan doesn't even cover staff to cover that 2-week waiting period before EI. So my suggestion is that we put the sick to be 10 days in a calendar year and exclude the 7 being carried forward, because that covers them that 2 weeks to get them to their EI sick leave, which then leads you into your long-term disability, versus having only 7 and possibly a carryover because they didn't even meet enough to get to EI. I think that's pretty much the gist.
Not to interrupt Councillor Jennings, I know we did have some talk about the temporary filling of a vacancy.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
On that. Yes.
Yeah, so what we've got in here, because we discussed the way that we were going to try and fill a temporary, and I said, the way that it's currently worded, it specified like 5 days. And I said, well, if you break your ankle, you could be like 8 weeks, for example. So we already know that somebody's going to be off. Why would we not pay the person that's going to be covering immediately, because the person's off? So why would you hold back that 5 days? It also then, in my discussions with Jasmine, because we had a great discussion, I brought in my experience in past where, and I brought it forward about our pay equity grid, or our salary grid has no blank lines between, where we had positions in the past. So I'll use the example of a public works superintendent. That level should technically have remained with a rating. And then we have gaps going between positions, although we only see our current positions, there are gaps in our grid that should be allotted as well, so that you have the ability to do those acting pays versus having to go strictly to the position that the person's covering, because they're not covering for the full duties. They're not covering at the same, perhaps they don't have the education factor, but they have the ability to get a good percentage of the job done. So if we have the other levels that are available,
Yeah.
it gives staff the ability to have that position to warrant to bumping up for the coverages that's required on a temporary.
I'll go to you, Claus, next. Thank you.
Yeah,
Karen.
thank you, Reeve. Not a question, maybe a question just for clarification. 6E, I guess, and 6, department head who is required to work excessive regular hours of work shall be paid the rate of time for hours worked in excess of the regular working hours. Are our department heads not considered a salary employee based on a contract price?
No.
So part of their package is a salary plus overtime if they work beyond the hours
Yeah, at a 1-to-1 rate, yes.
on a 1-to-1 rate. Okay, just clarify. I wasn't aware of that, so thank you.
Ian?
So I kind of agree with some of the stuff that's Karen's saying in regards to, the benefit package and the vacation time and everything else like that. I guess when I get down to the benefit package, I know we had made some changes to it at the previous council, but I don't know that, and I guess it was always explained that there was never an increase in cost, this and that. But according to this right here, we're paying 100% of the benefit package for every employee.
Yes, we pay the premium.
Do we have any idea what the cost is of that?
That's a good question.
I don't know offhand, but I can bring forward the information.
Because that would include the new dental and everything else that was added to that, Jasmine.
Yes.
So that's going to be a pretty significant bill at the end of the day, I would say monthly.
I don't know. I'd have to look. I don't know what the total is.
Because not that I'm, a little bit, I guess it really wasn't explained to us at that way when it was brought forward to us at the previous council. I would really like to know what that number is.
I can bring it forward. Yep. I know.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jasmine.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry,
Jasmine.
I know it's been, I think since I've been here, and I think for the majority of the history of the township, it's been the employer covers the 100% premium.
Yeah,
I know
I agree, and I know that it was kind of like that, but when you start to add dental and all those other things for a whole family, that can really stack up quite significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we should really understand what that cost is, because that's a huge draw factor when it comes to salaries and everything else that we're offering people. And
Yes.
I think that we need to really understand what that might be. I guess my other question is that we're saying in here that, if this person wants to take some leave, we're going to continue to pay their benefit package.
They would pay the premium.
They pay the premium.
They in the leave.
After
Yes.
they leave.
Oh,
So
Yeah.
what,
No, I'm still with
I just want
Ian.
to make sure I understand that right.
Yeah, the wording is intended that the employee pays the benefit premium for that employee.
Are you finished, Ian? Ian?
Yeah,
So-
I just want to make sure that that's clear, that if somebody takes a leave of absence or whatever it might be, unless it's a workplace incident or whatever it might be, that we're
Yes.
not paying benefit packages for someone that wants to take a 6-month vacation or pursue other matters or whatever it might be.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's certainly the intent of that section. I can make sure that the wording is very clear if it's not clear enough, for sure.
Okay, I have Karen and back to Claus then.
yeah. So that was where I made reference to the leaves, where I was saying that I have no problem when it is employment standard regulated, but definitely not outside of employment standard leaves, because of the fact that if we're asking for this sort of thing, even though the employee is going to pick up the premium after the month, but there are others where the employer has to keep it going as well. I would prefer that the word was very clear to say it's the Employment Standard Act leaves that we are approving only.
Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Just a little follow-up on Councillor Straight's comments, which I agree with. If a person goes off on short term, what is considered short-term leave?
It's a specific defined in the ESA. I think it's between.
I couldn't find it, sorry.
Yeah.
I can answer that one.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Short term is a total of 17 weeks and long term picks up after that.
Okay, so on the short term, the long term, they pay their own benefit premiums then? Just for clarification?
So under short term, they're under the EI program.
Okay. And long term?
Long term would be under our benefits program.
Okay, so and that kicks in, they pay that, we don't. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Ian?
I guess one of my other questions was you referenced in their department head ability to hire. Can you clarify that for me?
Like the internal hire?
Yeah. So do we not need council approval to be able to do that and all that other good stuff, or is this?
We could add in a specification that it should be with council approval.
Well, I think that
Yeah.
just saying that a department head manager has the ability to hire is a pretty wide open door, I guess, maybe potentially.
So are you suggesting, Jasmine, we add something there?
Yes. If that's what council would like, yes. In
Well,
terms
I
of an
think
internal hire.
Yeah, it's too, I think what you're saying is it's too vague and this is more clear.
Well, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble real quick if somebody decides and says, I want to go hire Mr. Ian Straight here, and we don't have approval, but yet they've already made them a formal offer and everything else. So you can get yourself in a little bit of water.
So on that issue, do we have consensus? We do, yes, to Jeff. Did you have a question, Jeff?
Well, I'm just kind of curious because is it intended that the department head can just hire somebody, or the department head can then replace somebody? Like if I don't know if we need to have council approval if
It would be to fill a vacancy. It wouldn't be
fill a
to hire.
vacancy. Yeah, the fill a
Wouldn't be to
vacancy
fill
of
a
what?
position.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we're not, if we're changing positions, we're adding positions, that's entirely into the council's
But
position.
that's
we
not
have to
what
hire.
It doesn't say to fulfill a vacancy. It says they have the ability to hire.
No, it does. It's when a vacancy is to be filled or when a new position is created. So the assumption
Perfect.
is that
Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
and the
wanna make
council
sure
would be the
that-
one that would be creating that position. Council would be the
Right.
one that would do that. So
My apologies.
Jeff,
I guess
sorry. So you go ahead, Ian, you weren't finished?
Yeah, finish, yeah, that's fine.
Well, I guess my last thing is the vacation. You mentioned about vacation time. So is the intent to offer up vacation when we're hiring people, extra vacation? We're going to go against what our policy says? Is that the idea there, or?
the idea is to provide the department head or the administrator the ability to provide more than the ESA minimum of vacation time when you're negotiating a new hire.
Okay.
So like if you're hiring, it's a pretty common practice. So like, especially if you're hiring in the management or department heads that have experience, in their jobs, they're already past those 2 weeks of vacation. So it's another ability for negotiation for compensation.
Okay, Jeff, and then to Karen. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I just, on that one comment on that, I agree with that, because if you're hiring somebody with 15 years experience in that position, if we get the luxury of doing that, I mean, yeah, they're going to require more than the 2 weeks of vacation to woo them over. I think that is pretty standard. The other side too as well, and I like Councillor Straight's point about the benefits, and I'm just curious to kind of go on top of that. The costing is great to know, but also I'm kind of curious, do other municipalities have the same, I guess it's a comparison sake to other municipalities. Is it the same as other municipalities? And is it the same where those municipalities pay it the entire shot, I guess? Because if it's a part of the employees that are paying some of it in other municipalities, I think it'd be a good point for our compensation package, so we understand that, yeah, we might be a little bit less in money than that position, but we offset it because of the good thing for our benefits. So I just more information about, because I like the idea Councilor Straight saying about what it costs, but I want to make sure we have a good relation to what's out there.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we have provided that information to council before, but I think that was a number of years ago.
Okay. Thanks, Karen.
Just when they're talking about vacation in the policy, it says about they can carry over vacation. If they carry over vacation, it has to be that when the vacation gets taken in the next year, when they're at a new rate of pay, it is paid out at the old rate that it was earned at.
Okay.
Well,
Okay. Anything else now? I assume. Okay, Jeff, and back to Ian. Jeff.
I'm just going to say on that point that Councillor Jennings is bringing up, but in our full-time, we don't have it as a percentage, because usually it's taken as a percentage of pay, and then and it fills up a pool, and then that's how you're paid your vacation out. So yeah, you can in theory lose some vacation over that time, but if we're just doing it as straight days, then
There's a difference.
So
There is a difference because you're
yeah.
getting paid a rate
Just
of pay
one
for
sec.
that
No,
rate.
I understand that, but we don't have that in our policy. Sorry, Reeve, I skipped there. But in our policy, it's stating days. Usually, it's a percentage that fills that. Which, yeah, I agree with you. But right now we have it as days. So how do you propose to make that change then, if we're going to do that?
Okay, so Ian was next. But I'll come back to you, Ian. I'm going to go just to Karen because she's got something to answer to what Jeff is bringing up, I think.
So the full-time are on days, the part-time are on percentage. So when the full-time carry forward their days, those days should be at the previous rate of pay, because come January 1st, they get cost of living, and then based on performance, they get merit steps. So if they're getting current year at the correct rate, when those 2 weeks, say for example, from last year were at an older rate, when those 2 weeks get taken, it has to be taken and paid at the old rate.
Okay, Ian, back to you.
Or they
Go
use
ahead.
them. There is no carry forward.
Yeah. Okay, Ian.
No, and that's kind of what I was getting to. There can be a significant difference in the cost of what's carried forward and what happens based on percentage.
Okay. Anything else? Now, I assume, Jasmine, that there's a couple of items here that you may need consensus by council.
So what I'm going to do is I'll read out everything I've written down in terms of notations for changes. And
Can
I
you
guess
go
maybe
one at a time?
no, it's probably good if I do them all together. And then if we can't get consensus on them all together, I'll do them one at a time. How does that sound?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. So we've got noted additional clarity to include education experience in item 3A. So employment standard regulated leaves for the terms of ESA rather than just the leave of absence. So just changing the wording there. In terms of vacation, part-time vacation payout to follow the ESA. The sick day changes would be 10 days in a calendar year with no carry forward. And then I do have the notation related to the temporary coverages, providing additional, it's that the wording is kind of difficult to kind of pick out at the moment, but in terms of like the temporary coverages, creating different levels in our pay grid to actually reflect, to provide, I guess, a little bit more flexibility and to reflect tasks that might be done during the vacancy filling. So we bring information forward on how that would look. And then bring forward information related to the costing of benefit packages and a comparison to other municipalities. Is that everything?
Was there something on the hiring?
I don't think so. I think that that one was clarified.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. So is everybody in favor? Do we have consensus on all of this?
So-
Karen?
So with reference to the hiring, I thought that there was a bit of a discussion with reference to, so they're gonna, negotiation is ability, so that somebody who's coming with 15 years experience, we're able to offer more vacation than just what our policy says, correct?
Yes.
With reference to the ability based off of their experience as well on the salary grid.
Yes,
'Cause it
that is
says-
already in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does also say you could put them at the end
Oh,
of the
right.
grid.
Yes, I believe that there is a bit of a typo because that wasn't what that was intended to say. So I will
Thank-
fix that for the next one.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have consensus on each of these points? I see no opposition. If anybody's opposed to any, just put your hand up, please. Yeah, Jeff, question, comment?
I'm unsure on a few of them, but let's do the vote anyways, because I imagine it's gonna go through anyways, so.
No, if we can't get consensus for all of them, then we have to deal with them each individually, which is okay too.
Consensus as in all of us agreeing or just three and
Yes.
two?
Well, I guess
Majority.
we have a majority. Okay,
So,
I'll go around.
Let's see
the
if we have
table.
consensus first before I like.
I'll go
before we-
around, I'll see if we do or not. So I'm gonna go to Claus, do we?
Yes,
Yes. Claus, yes?
yes,
Okay, Ian
Yep.
and Karen?
Yes.
So we have consensus there. And I'm sure, Jeff, that you can continue discussing it with Jasmine at any point. That's my thought.
And sorry, Reef.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's fine. Like some of the stuff, and I don't want to undermine anything of extra splitting of hairs.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the obviously the research and the input from Councillor Jennings too as well. So I mean, I'm happy with this is the decision that council is for. Then I support
Great.
it.
Thanks. Okay, so we do, yes, Karen?
I just want to say, like, Jasmine took a lot of time and put this together, which I appreciate. It was just basically some clarification of a few things, just to ensure that, again, if we're going to do it, we get it done now and we don't have to tweak it again. That was all. So.
Yeah. And obviously it's coming from some good experience of yours, Karen. So we also thank you for that. So I have a motion then. It was moved. Yes, before I do this motion.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
have consensus. So I'm going to recommend that the motion be modified. So the after and the following be recommended to council. We just put that council provide direction on further changes and information to be brought forward.
Okay.
Cross out.
Rather than me writing it all out here now, when I get there, you can just read that part if you could, please.
Sure.
So this then is moved by, this motion was moved by Ian Straight, seconded by Claus Vandermeer, that the committee of the whole receive the personnel policy updates report, and that the following be recommended to council.
Sorry, I just had it up and then I closed it. The council provide direction on further changes and information to be brought forward, and it is as I detailed earlier.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Okay, that is carried. Okay, thanks, Jasmine, for that.
Great.
And moving on.
We do have Carl on the call now.
Okay, so Carl is here now.
Yes.
So that was number, we did B. So now we're going to go back to 3A, which is on the Greer site plan amendment. And we have our planner, Carl Granke, with us. Oh, there you are. Thank you, Carl. Welcome, and we'll give you the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I think hopefully this proceeds technically a little easier than the than when I was here last time, and when we had some power outages and a few different some technical challenges there. Hopefully this one will go a little
Sorry.
smoother. So this we're bringing staff are bringing for council's direction a site plan amendment application for property described as 440 Sturgis Road. That's owned by Mary and Gary Greer. It's roughly a 42-acre parcel of land that borders Sturgis Road, Highway 15, the OVRT, former rail line, as well as a number of residential and commercial and agricultural uses nearby. So back in 2010, the township approved a site plan to accommodate self-storage that is largely accommodated within shipping containers, and over 100 have been built, approved, and have building permits issued for them. So the site plan agreement was fairly broad in a few aspects, but what it didn't do was accommodate any development outside of essentially the range of development that was accommodated there. So over the last number of months, the township became aware of some site work that has been happening on the property there, and that includes basically the laying of a gravel pad that we understand was intended to be used for storage. So that wasn't accommodated within the site plan approval. So normally, what happens when we have a non-compliance like that is staff give the opportunity for the proponent to bring it into compliance, or alternatively remove it or relocate the construction somewhere else. So in this case, and if they make a legitimate effort to follow the process and obtain planning or building approval, then we typically hold off on enforcement while that works its way through the system. So over the last little while, the proponents have decided to proceed to a site plan amendment application to regularize the gravel pad there. So the location they chose, that's their own, and ultimately when it comes to site plan approvals, the first thing we always look for is how do we accommodate and mitigate any impacts and accommodate something within the site if it complies with zoning. So the proponents were given the opportunity to consider somewhere else, and certainly if they took that opportunity, then the sort of mitigation conditions that we'd be looking for through the site plan process would be different and probably a little less substantial than what we're looking for here at something that's fairly close to a residential area. So at this point, we have a site plan application. The Planning Act requires the municipality to make a decision on that Planning Act application, and here we are. So I think it's important to note that for the sake of evaluation of the application, we do need to consider this as a proposal. So we recognize that the site it's cleared, the gravel's there, it's being used. However, that was done so entirely at the proponent's own risk. So certainly if council feels that this is better suited elsewhere, then that's a decision that's a decision that you can make. So I think ultimately there is history. Ultimately, we can evaluate the site plan application that's in front of us. We're not being asked to pick best location on the lot. If we were, this may not be my choice, but we are being asked to approve a site plan to accommodate a use that is in a location that the zoning does accommodate it. The zoning does allow open storage ancillary to a self-storage use, so long as it does have that enhanced setback of about 45 feet from a lot line that contains a residential development. So that has been complied. So when it comes down to it, the best way to regulate land use setbacks and locations on large lots is through zoning. So if something complies with the location and use provisions of zoning, then site plan approval is essentially a technical exercise that deals with landscape and design elements to ensure it's customized to a specific location. So we have a proposal for an open storage area that meets the criteria set forward in the zoning bylaw, and proposing a suite of conditions that if council approves the location, we recommend they establish in order to ensure that the project fits in and is compatible, basically implementing the compatibility provisions of the official plan. So that would include enhanced shrub planting, certainly above and beyond what's there right now, in order to create a solid fencing, and dark sky compliant lighting are all reasonable provisions and consistent with how staff would normally look at open storage. It's also important from our perspective that any site plan amendment and conditions be appropriately detailed so everyone is clear on the expectations and with appropriate provisions in place for enforcement. For instance, we'd be proposing some details that are go above and beyond what's provided for in the 2010 agreement. And the challenge we've had with the 2010 agreement is it's not all that detailed in terms of the spacing of the shrubs, how high they need to be, and all of that. So while there are concerns in the community about the location of the storage area, ultimately, that is a question of the appropriateness of land use on a lot, which is best regulated through zoning. In this case, we do have a lot that's zoned industrial, allowing a wide but not unlimited range of industrial uses. So the text associated with the proposal that's appended to this report, as well as what was verbally conveyed to me, was that the space would be retained as gravel and essentially for the passive storage of items such as trailers and boats that are reasonably ancillary to a self-storage use. Staff were, however, conveyed additional information this week that suggests that commercial truck staging is occurring there as well. While we've not had the opportunity to review and assess this, if this is indeed an additional use that's ongoing, then there are potentially other impacts associated which may trigger different impacts. And certainly that's something that we're bringing to council's attention to direct. And unfortunately, it could change some of the condition wording in my report if there is indeed, I guess, what our zoning bylaw would define as more of a transportation type of use. So at this point, staff are seeking council's direction on the township's position on the site plan amendment application. And the committee's direction can be implemented and finalized at a future council meeting, or either through more information or the formality of a bylaw or resolution. So if council does not support amending the site plan to accommodate the open storage area here, then that's certainly a legitimate position they can take. And we will look for a resolution to confirm that intent and outline the land use concerns that form the basis for this position. This resolution can be prepared for adoption at the next meeting and will form the basis of council's intent. The only caution I would convey at this point on that is the proposal that is outlined before us does meet zoning, and typically the site plan exercises to identify the important provisions and conditions to mitigate impact. So if we were to refuse to or not approve a site plan that meets zoning, then the proponent does have the ability to appeal that decision to the local planning appeals tribunal, and we would need to defend that decision. It may be more challenging to defend, and if this is something that meets zoning. So I will caution council on that, and certainly we would, if that's the direction council would look for, we'd like to certainly get your direction and your comments that can be incorporated in that resolution. If council does support amending the site plan, we will look for your direction firstly on the recommended mitigation conditions, keeping in mind what seems to be new information that we need to look into with respect to transportation use, and secondly on enforcement, and whether you'd like to see securities or some other way to emphasize enforcement. So that's something that often happens. If in this case, we have the construction there. So what often happens when we require fencing or screening or some other works is to collect securities, either a letter of credit or something else that's typically equal to up to the value of the work, and then that gets returned once the work is completed. And certainly any site plan approval would accommodate detailed implementation conditions and require compliance. So this is the proposal that's before council right now, and certainly we're interested in council's feedback on how you'd like to proceed with the planning application, and we're certainly available to provide any technical clarification or directions on the Planning Act implications of this. Thank you.
Carl, before I go to council, and thank you for this great report and all of these clear details that you're giving us. But I just have wondering about if you can let everyone know about the other stakeholders that you've talked to already that you had to, like RVCA.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So when we receive a site plan application, it's part of our process to, it's not just, there's always other stakeholders who we review applications with, and that's other departments have their own areas of jurisdiction, both within the municipality and outside the municipality. So in this case, we've also circulated the county, since they control, of course, the rail trail along the western frontage of the property. They haven't conveyed any concerns or comments on the application. Same with Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. The Ministry of Transportation has advised that they'd like stormwater to be looked at, typically in a one-page technical briefing. And if council supports the site plan application as in its current location, then that would be a condition of any municipal approval. And also, I have had conversations with the budding property owners who've raised concerns and inquiries on the proposal. But ultimately, this is a technical exercise with respect to the Planning Act decisions that the council needs to make on that.
Thank you. So I'll open it up to council. Any questions and comments? I saw Ian first and then Klaus.
I guess my question is for Jasmine. I kind of like to get the municipality's point of view on this whole thing. I know it's been a little bit maybe a contentious issue. There's been some calls, neighbors, everything else like that. Can you give us a rundown of where we're at from the township's point of view, and what you run up at, what you've dealt with so far? Is that possible?
In terms of the site compliance, I think it's clearly obvious that the site is not compliant with the current site plan, and this process is attempting to bring it into compliance.
Okay.
In terms of, I think some of that information would not necessarily be, related information would not necessarily be public information.
Okay.
Okay, and let's see. Somebody I can't remember. Klaus, I guess, was after.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Reeve. Carl, your comment in regards to visual screening and fencing and so forth, you may want to check with the companies that have put in the solar panel in the area and so forth. They would have the update as to what is required for visual screening and fencing and so forth. I don't know if you've looked into that or not.
Yes, Carl.
So what we often see around solar farms is a mixture of a berm as well as trees and vegetation that goes around that. So when that all grows up, it creates like an almost ironclad buffer that's very difficult to see anything behind it. Our zoning bylaw is not nearly as detailed in terms of what it looks for screening. So for instance, the bylaw only requires either a 1.5 meter fence or shrubs along there, and 5 feet, especially in a location like this where it's definitely not higher than the Greer property is definitely not higher than its abutting neighbors. I would suggest that's quite inadequate. So like a 1.8 meter fence and hedging along the side is typically what we as staff would look at for when we're looking at, say, like an open storage kind of use, something fairly passive that we're just looking at visually screening. If the use is a little bit more substantial, if it's a little bit more active, or we're looking at more noise or fumes impacts, then staff would be looking at something a little more substantial like a berm. But at the end of the day, this is council's decision on the application. And if council feels that a berm is appropriate here as a site plan condition at this location, then that's something we would definitely accommodate within our within our site plan agreement that we bring forward. So we'll look at for council's direction on that.
So, but you wouldn't necessarily be looking for council's direction regarding details about the site plan tonight, would you? Yes, Carol.
Just general direction. So if council feels that that a berm, for instance, as Deputy Reeve Vandermeer had, I guess, alluded to, then then we can look at that as, I can take that direction, and then we can, as staff, we can work on the technical aspects of that. So we don't need to really get into the weeds of these sorts of details, but we're just looking for the general direction. As firstly, is council prepared to entertain a site plan approval at this location? And secondly, if so, then what sort of general direction would you like to give us in terms of the screening conditions? So the items that have been noted in the report, are those sufficient, or do you want to see something else?
But you've pointed out, you've given us details of things that we're looking at, but we haven't made any decisions. I mean, we've talked about the fencing, and the issue there is that there may be a use now but it could change in the future. So there could be a different use. You mentioned stormwater, the idea of trailers and boats, or do we add other things also? And how the trees, well, how big should the trees be when they go in? So there's all kinds of details like that. And that's what I meant. Do you want us to be, like, if we move this forward, will you be wanting us to talk about these type of details tonight? So that was my questions, but I think you've answered it. So sorry, I'm going to go to Claus and then to Karen.
Yeah, Carl, in regards to, first off, I'm not sure where the new proposed site is on this map, but anyway, that's fine. In regards to open storage, you mentioned about boats and trailers and so forth, open storage. Is there going to be a security system put in place that people aren't trying to break into some of these trailers during the storage period of time? I mean, if it's not really tightly secured, there could be a lot of break and enters going on, and then we're taxing our OPP people for calls of service.
Yes, Carol.
Excellent question. That's not something that we've focused on through the review to date, since that hasn't been proposed from what I can see, and we haven't focused on the review to date. We've been looking more at landscape compatibility, but that's an excellent point, and certainly if council would like to see security fencing around there, that's a condition I'd be very pleased to include in a future site plan approval.
Thank you.
Okay, Karen.
So I have a couple comments. The first one is that I definitely would like to see stronger wording in our site plan agreements so that the securities are there to be able to address when work is done prior to approvals that are occurring. Because I'm a little disappointed that as a municipality, we don't have more ability to do something when things like this happen, because it's basically, I'll do it now and get approval later, which is not what we want to be doing in the municipality. So if it means that the wording in our site plan agreements needs to be stronger, then that is something I would like to see done. The next one has to do with, and I'm confused because I wasn't around when the original agreement was done, although I was around, but I just wasn't on council. I was on council when we did the discussion with reference to his last application where he wanted to put in the waste transfer. And we discussed at that point in time about open storage being related to the use. So we had discussions about, say, for example, a greenhouse was going in, open storage would occur that's relevant to that primary use. So how is this open storage related to the primary use where it's going? And then explain to me how the parking component comes into place, because I'm missing that part on how parking is part of the open storage. Because I mean, you've said that the zoning, I guess, it's not met where he's parking the commercial trailers, and that is happening. So I'm a little lost on how all of this is linking together.
Okay, Carl.
So in this case, the permitted primary use on the property is self-storage, and certainly there's lots and lots of units on that property that are located for that are rented out for self-storage. So in our view, the storage of, say, boats and trailers and that sort of thing, open storage, basically the storage of personal effects that are larger than what you can fit in those units. In our view, that's accessory and sort of related to the principal use of the self-storage facility on that yard. So what we'd considered back at the time of the zoning earlier on was open storage as a sole and only use on the property. And it wasn't really clear in our mind in my mind what that meant on the application, and ultimately that was not supported by council as a standalone use. But open storage as an ancillary use, as defined in our zoning bylaw, as ancillary to the main use that's already occurring, that's something that is permitted. And in my interpretation of the zoning bylaw, the open storage there is compliant with the provisions of the bylaw. In terms of the storage of, in terms of the, I guess the staging of trucks that are coming in and going, that's something that I learned in greater detail over the last couple of days was occurring there. And again, that's not necessarily non-compliant with the zoning. Even if it does meet the definition of a transportation depot in the zoning bylaw allows that on that use, but on the property. But the question for council now is the screening that we have. If we're looking at more of an active, industrial commercial type of use where we're parking, moving vehicles that aren't just being stored there, do we need to do screening that's a little bit more vigorous than what we would be looking for something very passive that's essentially just boats or RVs being stored for the winter?
Follow up?
Okay, Karen, yes.
So with reference to the open storage and the self-storage containers, so I don't rent a storage container, but I want to store an RV. That means I can still go in and store it because it's a primary use of self-storage, but I'm not using their self-storage. So I can put my RV there. Is that correct?
Yes, Carol.
That would be my interpretation of the bylaw, and in most other self-storage facilities where I've been discussing with proponents, there's usually, they don't always go with it, but there's almost always at least a discussion of that sort of ancillary operation to go along with the permanent structures that are getting built.
Okay. So then
Yes,
the clarification of the parking, like where it says current storage and parking, or open storage and parking. The parking is just the parking of the trailer. It's not actual parking of something else, right? Like using it as
Yes,
this transportation side?
So
Yes, Carol. Yes.
So what's been conveyed to me, Mr. Chair, is that we are looking at that this is essentially a parking storage of basically vehicles that are going to be stored there. But I understand from other conversations over the last little while that there is a more active component that's sort of a separate, if trucks are going to be coming and going and staged there as sort of a depot, that's actually a different land use category than the self-storage. So while it's permitted in zoning, that's something with council's direction, we would like to investigate a little bit. This is information that's come to staff much more recently, and that's something that we would like to investigate and perhaps report back a different suite of conditions, if that's what or stronger conditions on mitigation, if that's what council would like to do at that location.
And parking. It might mean that parking means the big 18-wheelers that pull in there, and the problem is then it doesn't just become parking, but it becomes having to run the motors, half the night when it's cold. So we have to look at a lot more detail, I'd say. But do you have a follow-up there, Karen? Because I'm going to go to
Yep.
I believe, Ian. So yes.
Just
yes,
one follow-up with reference to then the parking of these vehicles. Because of the fact that there is a residence there, that if there is leakage, how does the contamination from one location that gets covered under something separate to protect the residents well, because of the direct location? I mean, if it was in a different area, I guess it wouldn't be as much of a concern, but if you're going to have that and there's a contamination that occurs, the environmental concern, how do we ensure that the person is protected? Like the residents?
Yeah, but nobody has said that we're doing that
Well,
or not doing it.
If
Yeah.
we agree to the parking, that's what would come up though, right?
But if parking is,
Right.
if the definition of parking in this case means parking the storage vehicles we're talking about, if that's what we're talking about, it means just a vehicle being parked there and not running. I think that would be my understanding, but I guess this is one of the details that we certainly would have to know, I think. I'm going to go to Ian, please.
And I think that, as Mr. Granke's already kind of alluded to, there's been some information that's came to light, I think, in the last couple of days. And I think that, before I really want to make a decision on it, I think we need to make sure that we investigate all that information fully and make sure that we understand very thoroughly what this means and what the implications are. Because if it is big trucks or whatever it might be coming in there and parking and running all night, then I think that, we got to really look at where these positions are and where it's going to go with on the property. There's environmental containment issues. There's all kinds of stuff when you're talking about that kind of thing. Is this in the water intake zone for the town of Smith Falls, Carl? Do you know?
Yes, Carl.
It's in an intake protection zone with vulnerability score of 7. So it's in the minds of that, and the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority has circulated on that, and they always comment on that, but it is not within a zone that's more where the more stringent and mandatory policies apply. So for instance, if this was on the other side of the former rail line or on the other side of Sturgis Road, then chances are there'd be stronger source water protection wording that's associated with that. And that's something we looked at very closely with the transfer station when that was considered a few years ago as well. It was just on the side of a boundary that was where the less restrictive policies had applied.
So if I can follow up, Reeve, that's all right?
Yes.
So I think that, in the spring, it's my understanding that there might be some flooding issues and everything else there. So how does that all, you know what I mean? I think we want to be really careful what we're doing here. I think, before we make some kind of decision about what we're allowing and not allowing to happen here. I just want to make sure that we're pretty clear on that. From my point of view, I think the municipality is responsible for ensuring that we don't pollute somebody else's water at the end of the day.
So, and I think, my personal opinion is that we've just pointed out some information that we really would need to have before, as you say, Ian, we made a decision here. So yes, Jeff?
Thank you. I guess one question is if we refuse this, Carl, what's sort of the financial implications to the township if it goes to appeal and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, Carl.
So if we refuse it or establish conditions that are unacceptable to the proponent, he can appeal this just like any other planning decision that somebody agrees with. So then there's the financial implications of essentially a legal support in terms of how much the township is willing to invest in defending its position. So if there is a hearing, or at least if the process sort of advances, then chances are we're going to want to obtain legal guidance to sort of manage that end of things. And of course, the costs of that vary depending on how in depth this goes. But it wouldn't be free. So that's the I guess that's the best way I can forecast it. It's tough to be able to pin a cost, but that's unfortunately part of the planning process.
So Carl, like in your report, you're basically saying to us that, you know, everything is compliant, but are you basing that on what would have been happening, let's say, before the parking lot went in? But because you don't, like, we've just discovered this new information regarding activities that going on that I didn't know about. We all didn't know about till recently. You say you've heard of this in the last couple of days. So I'm not suggesting that we should approve or disapprove tonight. I do think it's really important that we get down into the weeds and find out what the details are of this. So you were saying maybe we shouldn't get into the weeds, but I feel that we have to get in somewhat into the weeds to get the details about what actually means, what does parking mean? Because if parking means one thing to one, and something completely different to other, then it's hard for us to be making a decision. I want to make sure that I have everybody, I want to make sure that Ian, your follow-up first, and then it's going to be Jeff and Karen and Claus. So Ian, were you finished?
Yeah. I guess my very last point to make is that, you know, I think that we really want to be careful on how we handle this. These are, you know, really precedent type setting things. And, you know, when we have site plans and everybody knows that we have to go through site plan approvals and people have been notified and everybody just kind of shoves that off the side and carries on their own way. You know, this is not really what we want happening within our township. You know, and I think that we need to handle it appropriately.
Okay, thanks, Jeff, and then Claus and Karen.
I guess just to follow up a little bit with my point with the refusal and to see where, I guess, the legal side and the costing of everything else. I mean, like, one thing, there's two sides of it. I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to encourage commercial growth as much as possible, because we want that, and we don't want to deter that any type of growth in the township. The other side, we want people to make sure that they're just following the rules. I think one thing about being on council the last couple of years that I've seen, and I think previous councils, is that and as really worked hard, I'm going to say, especially in the last 10 years, I've noticed in councils to try to work with people and to make it that we're not hard to get along with, and all that sort of positivity that we want people to come and do things the right way. I'm more in the mind of you know, I'd rather it be done the right way than the wrong way. And kind of the key on Karen's point, or Councillor Jennings' point about, you know, what can we do to make sure that is, and I'm almost on the fence of a refusal side, because it's let's go through that legwork and let's kind of have that, bring all of that, like what Reeve Dobson is saying, and that really brings things out of the weeds, because we're going to go through a bit of a tribunal and a little bit of a discussion point. I'm not looking to open up the coffers and spend a lot of money on that, but I mean, we can only, we gotta have an option. We have to either approve it or deny it. I mean, like, we can defer it a little bit, but I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence of denying it, and let's start a process and we can decide how far we want to go as we go through it.
I just think that whether we deny or not, if we denied, we're not really sure what we're denying because we don't have all the facts. And if we prove it, we don't have all the facts. So it's very difficult.
The follow up with that, though.
Yes.
I agree with you on the facts. We do, but the facts we do have is that a lot of skating of the line as far as doing first and asking permission after. So I mean, I think there is. So that's so we do have some facts, and for some of those facts, and obviously some of the facts we're obviously getting recently, I could say, sort of put me on that side, because it's like I want people to do the right thing, and I don't want to encourage the wrong thing.
Yeah. Claus?
Thank you, Reeve. Tonight we've come up with an awful lot of scenarios that we're kind of worried about and leery about and so forth. So I think we're a long ways away from making a decision on this. Plus, we're looking at the future of our township here, and making a decision on this here can have a huge impact on what the future of our township may look like. So we want to be awful careful which way we go with this. And I would have to agree with Councillor Carroll. Right now, I'm sitting on the fence of denying this because it's just very uncertain as to what the proponent is trying to propose. Thank you.
Karen?
So I'm concerned that when I voted back on the property for the waste transfer, and I voted on open storage being relevant to the thing, I was not intending on allowing open storage going along with the storage units that are already there. That I thought was addressed. This was then moving forward for the parcel that I thought I was dealing with, not the whole bloody parcel. So I definitely want to make sure that it's clear as to what I'm voting for, because I have witnessed all of this occurring as I drive to work every day. I've been in contact with the staff as well, addressing my concerns about the parking lot that went on. I've seen the lighting. I've seen that truck that parks there, the tractor trailer that parks there on a regular basis. I've seen numerous things going on. And that's the thing is, like, I don't want to allow more to keep going on, because if one gets away with it, then more are going to get away with it. So I want to make sure that when we move forward, I know exactly what it is I'm approving. Because as I said, I understood that when we discussed the greenhouse, there's open storage related to it, but I didn't know it was going to come back to the open storage related to something that was put in back in 2010. Because at that point too, I understood it was only supposed to be on the west side, not on the east side, and it continues to grow. And so it was very weak back then. And I think what we need to do is make sure that we're closing up all the loopholes that seem to still be in existence, because that wasn't my intention when what I was approving back when we did the waste transfer side.
Ian?
I think we should defer this whole thing until the next meeting and have an opportunity to have a
Well, definitely.
greater discussion with our staff.
So do you want to make a motion to that effect, Ian, please?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we defer this until the next meeting and we have a further in-depth discussion with our staff.
Okay, and Claus?
I second that motion and totally agree.
Okay, so before we vote, Jasmine, you had your hand up?
Yes, so I think the deferral definitely can be accommodated. And I have a number of notes in terms of things that council has indicated that you'd want to see. I guess the big thing is to defer the item for another meeting. I would like definitely to be very clear on what council wants to see from that next meeting. Like what information you'd like us to bring forward. So I do have items related to the fencing and berming, sorry, like the big berms. Stronger wording in terms of securities, in terms of like enforcing the site plan. And the biggest one is the difference and clarification on what parking versus storage means, and what storage would mean as an accessory to that self-storage, like an open storage, sorry, in that case. Clarification on the intake protection zone, and I guess more details around how the open storage is intended to work. Would that be accurate?
I think that it sounds like it's all accurate, unless we have other things that you may have not put on the list, Jasmine. But I mean, I think we did talk about trees. So is that something that you would
That's related to well, I can put berming, like it's just the screening.
Okay. And what about stormwater?
Did we talk about that?
Well, it was mentioned.
No, it's in there though. We did have a conversation about. I guess it all boils down to what the area is allowed to be used for, right? So what does that mean if the area floods and diesel fuel or something of that nature, runs all over the place onto the other proponent's property and goes down their well? What does that look like at the end of the day? That's what I want to make sure we're We got our T's crossed and our I's dotted here.
Yes. Did you want to respond there? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, Carol?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I think in this case, the zoning bylaw allows quite a lot of uses to occur at this location at the spot that's identified. The key thing here is what is clarifying the nature and extent, I guess, of everything that's happening there, which would allow us, if council is willing to entertain a site plan approval at this location. And the sense I'm getting is that the council would like to see more information related to this. And I think part of that to come back to is clarifying and confirming everything that's proposed to occur there, and then what important conditions and mitigative conditions are essential to ensure that fits in at that particular location. So the zoning allows it, but we need to be careful and diligent to ensure that the site plan conditions reflect the exact intended nature of the land uses there to minimize impacts on the abutting properties.
And I think, Jasmine, I think a couple of other things we may want to consider adding to that list, because it's still not really clear. We did talk about collecting securities to make sure that we were protected. And we also did talk about some kind of a plan, I guess, for mitigation, but also a plan for enforcement.
Yes, I have that noted already.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
So when the zoning allows for what's being there, that includes that transportation depot?
Yes, Carol.
So if indeed a transportation depot is what's occurring there, and I'm not sure how many trucks, like I don't know that it necessarily meets that definition. That's something that we'd investigate. But if indeed that is the case, the zoning does allow it there. So then the question for council, if that is what's happening there, and that's what would need to be verified, if that is what's happening there, then through the site plan process, we establish the appropriate mitigations and bufferings to protect abutting uses. So for instance, if there is a transportation depot there, we may be looking at something different than simply a 6-foot fence and a hedge. We might be looking at a different sort of buffer, and certainly I can come back with more information on any sort of environmental considerations that may arise as well.
But so right now we allow, you say we are allowing transportation depot. So
it is a permitted use within the zoning bylaw.
So yeah, so that could be 50 transports there. It could be, I guess I'm saying. And do we then have the problems that's been pointed out, of fumes and the possibility of leakage, sound, being close to, a residential area and so on. So yes, Carol?
It could be. We would need to investigate what that all means. But yes, typically it's, if somebody were to come forward with the proposal and knock on our door looking for that at that location, then the zoning bylaw would allow it, and then it becomes a site plan exercise to confirm the size, the shape, all of those sorts of details, and properly mitigate it. But I think it may not be, we may not be dealing with that here. So that's certainly something that I can reach out to and investigate with everybody there.
Yes. Karen, did you have your hand up?
Nope.
Okay. Anybody else?
Nope.
Okay, then thank you, Carl,
Josh?
for this. We do have a motion that was on the floor. It was moved by Ian and seconded by Claus, that we defer this until, Ian, did you say till the next meeting?
Yeah, I would like to get all the information. I'm just wondering about the course of action, what's occurred with the municipality.
Okay.
And the piece of property and everything else. Is that warranted in camera session, Jasmine? Is that the only way probably to get the information?
I would have to look into that if that's information that council wants to know. I can look into that if you'd like to direct me to do that.
So first of all, Carl, is is it okay then if we just go ahead and defer this tonight and then, but I just want to make sure that I don't want to say the next meeting if that's not enough time. Yes, Carl. So it's about a matter of how much time do you need to collect this information?
We can aim for the next meeting, but I can't necessarily promise for the next meeting. But at the end of the day, the important thing for me is that council's comfortable with whatever decision that you make, and we want to make sure that you have the information you need. So
Yeah.
I wasn't anticipating that we would have a firm decision in every single detail all tidied up this evening, but I think what I was looking for is just council's general direction on how do you want to, in light of the history, how do you want to proceed? And I think I have some direction. You want some more information on some key items, and that's what we'll go and get.
Okay, thank you. And Jasmine, I can't remember, what did you say you needed consensus on?
Related to an in-camera session related to the status of the property.
Okay, so we need consensus to ask staff direction to look into having an in-camera meeting regarding this issue. So I'll go around. Claus
Yes.
and Jeff
Totally, yeah.
and Ian
Yeah.
and Karen.
Yes.
We have consensus for that, Jasmine? Okay. And so moving on then, thank you, Carl, for this one. And we're going to be moving on then to the next.
Jasmine.
Yes, Karen. Yes, Jasmine.
Did you call the vote for the deferral motion?
I thought we had.
We did
Yes.
consensus.
Oh, yes. No, we'll call with the vote for the
Oh, sorry.
deferral. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Yeah, thanks. We have consensus and we call the vote now. Thanks, Jasmine, for reminding me that. So moving on then, the next one is also yours on the water wastewater financial plan.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, Carl.
See you, Carl.
Bye.
Figure out.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine, for this.
So we did note, I did note at the last meeting related to the water wastewater financial plan. We are required to undertake a water wastewater financial plan every 5 years. The last one was done in 2016. So the deadline is coming up a bit quick. So we must have a completed financial plan as of January 28th, 2021 in order to undertake our water wastewater license renewal. Actually, it's really our water license renewal as per OREG 45307. So I did manage to find 2 companies that provide this service. It's a very limited pool of companies that provide this type of service. I received 2 quotations. Low was $8,500. So we are proceeding with this project. The final report will be presented to council no later than January 19th, at the January 19th meeting in 2021. It is a 2021 budgeted item. Any incidental costs incurred can be accommodated in the contracted services budget and water wastewater, which is currently not utilized. So it's just a report to let council know that we're proceeding with it, and we'll be done in meeting our regulatory timelines.
Any questions from council?
No.
Seeing none, we have a motion moved by Karen Jennings, second by Jeff Carroll, that the committee of the whole receive the following report. The water wastewater financial plan report, and that the following be recommended to council, that we receive this for information. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next one, we have our treasurer, Andrew. Hi, Andrew. And this first one is on the third quarter financial statement. So welcome, Andrew, and thank you for this.
All right, good evening, Reeve Dobson and members of Committee of the Whole. So this report, it's the report for the budget to actual as of September 30th, 2020. And the recommendation is that council receives this report for information. I've made note of a few items in the report, and I've shown how things are progressing from September into October as well with those notes. One of the notes I've made is the equipment maintenance category for Public Works. A couple of the pieces of equipment in that category are over budget. One is the International 2016 plow truck, and the other is the 2008 John Deere wheeled excavator. But I wanted to make note that if you look at that category with the subtotals versus the year-to-date for the prior year, it's on par. It's running similar to the previous year. So that often happens where you can't always anticipate which piece of equipment will break when, and in the budget process, it takes that into consideration. So another thing I've noted is we received the information from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for phase 2 of the Safe Restart Agreement. They've made very clear in their criteria for that there would have to be an excessive loss beyond the phase 1 amount. There would have had to be an operational impacts only and not related to capital. And it only applies to 2020, not to 2021. And the township would have to be able to illustrate very clearly service adjustments to depleted reserves and other measures taken to manage COVID-19 operating impacts for phase 2 to even be a consideration. So it was a lot more stringent than I was hoping for. Found that out just in the last week. So overall, for quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3, we have some variances, but as a whole, we're tracking okay. We're following the budget plan, utilizing the resources as approved by council in the budget process. And so far for quarter 4, there's no known or foreseen outliers yet that would cause concern. The equipment maintenance issues are something that will be addressed further when we are getting into our 2021 budgeting process and looking at those capital items.
Thanks, Andrew. Any questions from council? Jeff?
Thanks, Reeve. Andrew, so for the phase 1, we had to put in like a explanation for how we spent that money?
They'll be reporting for that in March, and it's not necessarily line specific, but as a total up against phase 2, you have to show that it exceeds what we received so far, which was the 95,900. And as I project to the end of the year, I don't see from the different items I've looked at that we'll exceed that.
Yes, Jeff?
Will we have to pay any of it back, or is it something that we can make sure that we found enough to?
What they noted in the phase 1 correspondence was that anything that's left should be put aside in its own reserve and will be there in 2021. That's the way they worded it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome.
So seeing no further questions, I have a motion that was moved by Klaus Vandermeer and seconded by Ian Straight, that the committee of the whole received the following report: the budget to actual September the 30th, 2020, and that the following be recommended to council, that council receive this report for information. All in favor? And that is all in favor. Sorry. Yeah, that is carried. Thank you. And thank you, Andrew, for this. Thank you. Then moving on, we have the next motion is regarding 5 different groups. And I'm just wondering, I'm going to read them and then we can have a discussion on any one individual if you wish. This motion was moved by Jeff Carroll and seconded by Karen Jennings, that the committee of the whole received the following report, that being the 3rd quarter report for the fire, the water, the building, the quarter overtime report, and the MLEO 3rd quarter report. And that the following be recommended, that we receive these reports for information. So did we have any questions on any of these or comments? Karen?
Just I noted that in comparing second and third quarter, there's some categories that are missed on the third quarter for part of the totals. So just if they could do a comparison so that on the next one, that it's all there and the consistency flows through,
Which report is that? Sorry.
both on the fire and the MLEO.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Seeing no further questions, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And moving on to the reports of committees, we have none. No petitions, no motions, no notices of motion, no unfinished and other business. And before we adjourn, do we have any questions, Jasmine?
Let me just check. Just give me a minute. I have not received any questions.
Okay, so we do have a motion moved by Ian Straight, seconded by Klaus Vandermeer, that this committee of the whole meeting do now adjourn at
8:01.
Good.
8:01 p.m. All in favor? And that is carried. So thank you to our public who is with us, and Jasmine and all of our staff for all the reports, and everybody on council. Lots of really good things happening, and lots of good discussion. So thanks for everything, and I guess we'll see everybody at our next meeting.
Yep.
Yep.
Good night, everybody.
Bye now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine.